Hi, my name is Adrienne Moment, and this is the solo exhibit, Analog, of my hand-cut and assembled silver gelatin photo collages. These collages are inspired by the architecture and urban landscapes of New York, as well as other objects, places, times that have meaning personally. I feel very fortunate to have a show here. It's from September 17th through December 17th of 2020, and we've already had 3 wonderful mini receptions with an outdoor open-air portico with a lovely bar and pre-wrapped snacks, and we take registrations for up to 12 guests for social distance, COVID-conscious receptions. This photo collage, Double Cotillion, is made of numerous prints of a cartouche over a doorway in Manhattan, which I've cut and assembled into a circular shape. Further in this talk down the hallway, there's actually another piece which is made of the same photograph but printed larger and configured differently. This piece, Light at the Ends of the Tunnel, is actually made of prints that are torn rather than cut. This is the only piece that I've made with this procedure. And originally, these prints I decided were not good enough to make a collage, so I put them in stacks and I tore them up. And then when I had them in a pile, I thought, I want to take one last look to see if I could do anything with them. And I arranged them into this configuration, and I really like the way that they looked, and they really come off of the substrate in a very three-dimensional way. This piece, Beehive, brought me back to some childhood things that I used to do, which is cutting out objects, collaging them, and adding other elements. I've actually used here millinery flower stamens on the bottom and the top of most of the pieces. And this collage is actually made of pieces that remained from a much larger, complicated piece. So I got to name this Beehive because the way the pieces went together and the imagery that resulted reminded me of the flapping wings of a bee. And also, the shape of each element reminded me of the shape of the holes in an actual hive. And when I put them together, I felt that the whole configuration reminded me of a segment of a beehive. And so I put these little millinery flower stamens there to recall the delicacy and ethereal nature of bees and natural forms. Matrix Retrograde is one of the darkest pieces that I've ever made in terms of the actual tonality of it, and this piece was made shooting through 2 sets of glass store windows. I was standing inside of a store and I looked through the window and I saw the reflected lights of the fluorescent fixtures behind me, and also the spotlights that had the objects that were in that store, and then there's also some additional reflection of the store across the street. This was a situation which happens occasionally where I'll take the shot and I'll think, oh, this is too dark. It's not going to come out, it's not going to look good or be anything. But then when I process the film and make the prints, I think, wow, there's something really special here. So there was born Matrix Retrograde. This collage, Flatiron Frieze, is Surprise, the Flatiron Building in New York City. And when I made this collage, I was playing with the prints, thinking, what can I do with them that will make them special and different and not just be, oh yeah, that's the Flatiron Building. So what I decided to do with each of the 32 prints was I cut out the center of the building and I left the tiny architectural detail so that you can see it creating a shadow as it raises above the surface of the paper. Even on the ends, there's a little crown at the top of the building, which also casts a shadow or several shadows depending on how the light is shining on the piece. This collage is a perfect example of how I use the techniques that I do to achieve a sense of unity and tension at the very same time. When I start with a stack of prints, I'll use a pair of cardboard cropping L's, and I will play with them on the piece itself. I will obscure certain parts of it. I will highlight other parts to see what looks like an interesting section to use as a starting point for a collage. So once I start with that first cut, I will cut out several of them and put them together in a way that seems to work. And as I go along, it's very intuitive, and I almost feel like it tells me what it wants to be. I don't decide, it lets me know, and my hands and my consciousness are just the channel through which this process occurs. So this piece is the cartouches that I referenced earlier. These were the first prints that I made, which are the larger size of the two prints. And when I made this, I looked at these prints, I looked at the stack of prints, and I thought, wow, am I going to be able to cut out these tiny little elements of the cartouche without wrecking it? And I am proud to say that I actually did. And someone who saw the other piece in person at a gallery last year could have sworn that it was a digital print and was astounded when I said, no, it's actually hand cut, because the sections are so tiny that you can barely get an X-Acto knife blade into it. So I'm very happy, and it's a lot of fun, and this also brings me back to childhood, where it was almost like a personal challenge. The tinier the thing is that needs to be cut out, the more delicate it is, the more I want to do it, and the more I enjoy the doing of it. So this is a perfect example of that. This piece, Goodbye to All That, was made over a 4-year period. At one point I put it away and I came back to it in January of this year, and it represents to me letting go of certain ways of thinking and feeling and being as I was developing myself over the course of time. The photographic lemon slices, as some people like to call them, are actually multiple prints of a spiral staircase in a Fifth Avenue retail store with a big plate glass window. So that's a sort of little hidden feature there. And in this piece I incorporate sequins, Swarovski crystals, wooden elements, paper elements, glass beads, sequins, everything you can possibly imagine, and even a couple of seashells as well as a couple of cut paper elements. So this to me means letting go of an old way of life and making way for the new, saying goodbye to what felt like glory, younger pursuits, endeavors, wildness, happiness, craziness, and leaving an empty space for what's going to come next. Bouquet of Lights is one of the pieces where I started to not try and flatten the prints to the substrate. I actually decided I was going to go with and utilize the natural curvature of darkroom prints. So when I cut out each of these elements, I thought, it looks like a flower. It's actually a light fixture. I was having dinner with 2 friends on a wonderful evening, and we went to a restaurant and I saw this light fixture above us. Nothing really special about it, but something about the way the light looked was magical to me, and that was why I took this photograph. So it's a bouquet of lights, and that's where the name came from. Lights in the Window is one of those pieces that I just had to make the prints because I loved the images, which happens to be a grouping of light fixtures hanging from a ceiling. I thought to myself, how can this possibly be a collage? This doesn't make sense. But then, when I cut them out playing with the arrangement, I realized there was something there. It's something a little unusual, a little different, but something that I really, really love. And one of the things about this piece that I particularly like is that when you stand far away, you see one thing, you see the overall shapes of it. And then when you come closer and closer, you actually get to see the individual lights and how I cut the prints on an angle. And you see that they're both right side up and upside down. So it really plays with your eye, it plays with perception, and it's actually a real life thing when you get closer to it. So another interesting thing to me about this piece is the use of negative space. When I was assembling it, part of what made me choose to assemble it in this way was juxtaposing different parts and seeing the shapes inherent in the white space that show through between the photographic elements that make shapes and pictures and objects unto themselves, even if abstracted. The show Analog is open through December the 17th, and public gallery hours are every Saturday from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m., and the gallery is also open by appointment, which we welcome and encourage if you can't make it on a Saturday. We also anticipate having at least a couple of more COVID-conscious, socially distant mini artist receptions, so please get on the mailing list if you'd like to show invitations for reservations. I hope you can come see it and share with me what I've been making in the darkroom and studio for the past 20 years or so.